All righty, good morning, folks. It's like 11:45. We'll give it a minute or so, see if anybody else shows up, and then we'll get started. So we can draw this a little straighter. That's a little better. All right, so it is 12:16. We'll go ahead and get started. Mr. R back with you. All right, so a little bit of a review first. Well, I'm very close there. Let's step back a little bit. We were talking earlier in the, I guess 2 weeks ago now. We went over line and had a unit on line and how we use line in drawings, right? We made some pretty clear distinctions about contour lines versus outlines, what those look like, what they do, and the differences between them. And of course, we discussed this idea that in general, when you're drawing, you're always using a contour line, really whether you know it or not, right? Of course, that's just a line that goes around the outside of an object in the same way an outline does, but also goes across that object. Right? Last week, we moved into a discussion of value, right? Of course, remember that value is essentially just how light or how dark an object is, right? And of course, value refers to color, but it also can refer to pencil drawings, right? And the way that we introduce value into a drawing, of course, is through the use of shading. So last week, we were exploring those 4 shading techniques: hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and blending. And you guys did a lot of great work using those. A lot of very cool drawings. That was a lot of fun for me to go over those and look at them. All right, this week, we're gonna move into a discussion of space as an element of art, right? Some of this may be a review for some of you guys. For some of you, it'll be brand new. But it, again, is just like line and value. It's so sort of foundational. It's so important that it bears repeating no matter what level you are working at. All right, looks like more folks are joining us.
I just got in.
No worries, you're not late. I'm gonna open the chat room up. If you guys would, just please type in the word "here" into the chat room. That way I can get some idea about, I can use it as attendance and get some idea of who's with us today. As soon as you get a chance, just go ahead and type in the word "here" into the chat room. All right. Good. There we go.
I thought this thing fell and fucking will break. It's just plastic.
There you go. All right. So like I mentioned, we are going to discuss space this week, the ways that we can use space, how we can manipulate space in our drawings to make them seem more real, to make them seem more three-dimensional, right? To create the illusion there's depth and area inside of a drawing. Because we know on an intellectual level, right? Let's look at a quick example. Hopefully you guys see without too much glare on it.
I'm not that stupid. At least not sometimes here, at least. But I am.
There we go. Something like that, maybe. A lot of glare on there, but this is a painting from the mid-19th century, probably the 1860s, 1865, yeah, I believe it says. Called Looking Down Yosemite Valley, right? You can see that it is exactly that. We're sort of standing between these two mountains, looking through this valley, and the way the artist has represented things here, it looks like you can sort of step in here, maybe get on your horse here and you can ride all the way into that distance. Like there's an area here, like it's a window into another world. That's kind of what we're trying to pull off in a work of art, to create the illusion that there's depth and distance and area there. Okay, so that is what we are talking about when we refer to space. You know, space is important in other art forms as well. Literal physical space in the real world applies to things like sculpture, to architecture, and things like that. But more often, if you're drawing, if you're painting, if you're working on something two-dimensional, you're trying to create the illusion of space, okay, what we call illusionistic space. So that's what we're really going to focus on. The other uses of space are important, but not nearly as important as illusionistic space is for us. All right. Now we're going to focus most of our energy on what is called linear perspective, right? Using lines that come together into a point, that converge together to create the illusion of depth and space and area. But there are other ways, older ways, right? Linear perspective really wasn't invented until the Renaissance, early in the Renaissance. So you're looking at the early 15th century, probably 1420, 1415, very, very, very early in the 15th century. But obviously there was a lot of art before the 15th century. So there are ways that artists created perspective, created space, and the illusion that some things were closer than other things in the drawing. There are ways that artists did that before linear perspective was invented. So let's take a look at some of those methods. I'm gonna carry you guys with me. Ways of creating perspective, all right? And probably the most straightforward of these, I'm getting you guys crooked here. The most straightforward of these is this idea of just overlapping shapes, right? If two shapes overlap, the one in the front is gonna seem like it's closer to the viewer, and you've created an automatic sort of sense of space there, that there is at least as much distance from here to here between these two objects, okay? So one of the oldest ways of creating the illusion of perspective in a work of art. Same idea with size, right? The smaller an object is, the farther away it's gonna seem, and the larger that object gets, the closer it's gonna seem. So again, you create this sort of range of distance between small and large objects. It makes it feel like the bigger ones are closer to the viewer. Let's see, placement. Using placement to create space, to create depth and perspective, right? It's as simple as this. Things that are lower on the page will seem closer to the viewer. Things that are higher on the page will seem farther away from the viewer, okay? So easy peasy. And finally, this idea of detail and color, right? The more detail, the more color, the more full color that an object has, the closer it's gonna seem to the viewer. And the less amount of detail, the less color that object has, the farther away it's gonna seem to the viewer. So those are ways that artists created this same sense of space, the same sense of depth and perspective before the invention of linear perspective, okay? But linear perspective is what we're gonna focus on. This is sort of, even though it's at this point, over 500 years old, it is still our best method for creating the illusion of depth inside of a flat two-dimensional work of art, okay? So we're gonna start out with some very, very simple linear perspective today. This idea of a 1-point linear perspective, right? All linear perspective exercises always start in the same way. So we can always start there, right? They always start with a horizon line, right? You see this line going from one side of your paper all the way to the other horizontally, right? Which means sideways, horizontally across your paper. And this is what we call the horizon line. Okay? That's our horizon line. And it literally is supposed to be sort of a symbolic representation of the horizon, right? If you're standing at the beach, for example, and you look out at the ocean, where the water and the sky, that line where they sort of come together, that's your horizon. That's the horizon in the real world, okay? What we're trying to do is sort of essentially simulate that in a drawing with just a horizontal line, again, that goes from side to side on your paper and suggests that horizon, that place where the ground and the sky meet, okay? Okay, and what we're doing again is 1-point linear perspective. That means you have one single vanishing point. So you're gonna put a dot, that vanishing point, somewhere on this horizon line, and you decide where. Anywhere on the horizon line, we're gonna find a good spot, all right? Anywhere in between here, let's just go, I don't know, maybe somewhere a little bit off the center there. That'll be our horizon line. Put you guys a little bit closer. Right, horizon line, just a line going sideways across the page. There's our vanishing point, that dot. Maybe we'll go ahead and label that as well. Right, this is where the 1 point in 1-point linear perspective comes from, that one single vanishing point. As the week goes on, we'll look at some more complex forms of a linear perspective. Certainly we'll look at 2-point linear perspective. If we have time, we'll try to get into 3-point linear perspective as well. And as you may have guessed, of course, those numbers refer to the number of vanishing points. 1-point linear perspective has 1 vanishing point, 2-point linear perspective has 2, and 3-point linear perspective obviously has 3 vanishing points. Okay, but for now, I want to keep it simple, right? So the first step is always a horizon line, then a vanishing point, right? That is the line, that is that point, rather, is where all of your shapes are going to converge back to. Okay, let's see what I mean by that. We'll draw a geometric shape of some kind. Ooh, not a very straight line, but Okay. You guys may want to use a ruler to do that instead of drawing it freehand like I did, because mine was kind of busted, right? So you've drawn your horizon line, your vanishing point somewhere on that horizon line, and now the form that you want to see to make it appear as if it's going back in space. Okay. So the way we do that is by taking the corners of that shape, taking all the visible corners back to that vanishing point. Like so, okay? One corner goes back to there. All right. Second corner. You definitely want to use a ruler or a straight edge or some form to do this with, so you're not drawing wonky, curvy lines. And one more. In the corner, back down to our vanishing point. Okay? And now you create the illusion, this square, right, goes backwards into space where it came from, back to this dot, right? And again, it's this idea of converging lines, bringing lines together to make it seem like they're disappearing backwards into space. Imagine if you were standing on a railroad track, right? You're standing right in the middle of the tracks and you look off into the distance. At a certain point, they're going to look like they're coming together and they'll kind of disappear. Again, that's what we're trying to simulate here. It's what we're trying to sort of suggest. Same idea if you're standing in the middle of the road. I wouldn't suggest that, but if you're standing in the middle of the road, right, it would be wide where you're standing, and then as far off as you can see, it's going to get closer and closer and closer and closer until those two sides look like they're connecting, like they're touching one another. That's what linear perspective is trying to simulate, essentially. Okay? All right, let's do another one down here. We don't have so much going on. And again, we'll just keep it with a nice simple square. One corner, back to our vanishing point. Second corner, right to our vanishing point. And finally, the third corner, back to the vanishing point, right? There it is. All right, so you create this illusion that it's going backwards into space. That's what we're going for. Okay. Now you could leave it the shape like this if you were drawing something like a really long train or something that's going way, way, way in the distance, a very, very long shape that's going way back in the distance and kind of disappearing beyond the horizon. But in most instances, what you're going to be drawing will have some sort of a reasonable length, and it won't be like this is, just kind of disappearing off and forever, right? So if you're drawing, say, I don't know, the trailer off of an 18-wheeler, right, or something just a very long sort of rectangle, it still has to end somewhere. Okay, so the way to change this so it looks like that is to remember one simple rule, okay? Vertical lines are always vertical in linear perspective. Vertical lines are always vertical, meaning that anytime you're going to draw a straight line up and down, it's always going to remain straight up and down, no matter where it is in the picture. So we can come in and just add a vertical line somewhere, maybe right here. This side, that'll give us the end of this shape. We can get rid of this guideline, we don't need him anymore. Okay, so this now has become the side, right? This is the front of our shape, and this has become the side of it now. Right? We did that again just by instituting a straight up and down vertical line, because vertical lines always remain vertical in linear perspective. We'll cap this off at the top with another horizontal line. Just straight across. We can get rid of these guidelines now. We don't need those anymore either. All right. And we have created the illusion that this shape, the shape starts here, right? Here's the front of the shape. Here's the side. And now it looks like it's going backwards into space until it ends, right? But just like any other shape, the way our eye naturally sees, when something gets farther away from you, it's going to seem smaller and smaller. Okay, so this technique sort of simulates that, kind of mimics that, and gives us a way to make things look on the page like they would look in real life. All All righty. In your Canvas assignment today, I've asked you guys, I don't know if it was 4 or 5, but to draw either 4 or 5 geometric forms the same way I have, and just draw them in perspective, in linear perspective. Meaning you'll do exactly what I've done here, okay? You'll make the corners of your shapes go back to a single vanishing point. And then you can either keep those full length like this, so it goes all the way back to the vanishing point, or more likely you may want to try with at least one of them, try ending it before you get there. Woo. Let's fix that. So it looks like a closed-in shape, but it's a shape in perspective. So it looks like it's getting smaller the farther away from the viewer it gets. And like it's getting larger, right? We're standing here, so this end is the closest to us. So this end will be the biggest, of course. And obviously, that end will seem smaller to us because it's farther away from the viewer, okay? So you guys are gonna try and do this today. You're gonna try and draw 5 shapes. When you draw above the horizon line, like right, anything on this side of the horizon line on the top, will seem like it's essentially sort of going through the air, like it's flying through the air, which can be a cool, fun effect. If you draw it below the horizon line, it's gonna make that shape like it's here on the ground, like it's sort of attached to the ground. So you can draw your shapes above or below the horizon line. You may want to try a combination of both, actually. You just get a little bit of experience, sort of playing around with both approaches to this. Alrighty. As I mentioned earlier, we will, of course, get into some more complex forms of linear perspective later in the week. But for today, man, I want to start out nice and simple and keep things relatively brief so you have plenty of time to draw, okay? But in a nutshell, this is how it works. We're going to draw a geometric shape of some sort using a ruler. You'll draw lines. Whoa, that's why you should use a ruler. Draw lines to your corners, and it will give you that same shape in perspective. Remember that vertical lines remain vertical. So if we want to end this, we'll just go straight up and down on the side, and then straight across on the top. All right. You don't need those anymore. Now, of course, you may have noticed that when we draw these converging lines going away from the shape, we're skipping one corner, right? Because the idea here is that these are solid objects. This is, you know, the trailer behind a tractor trailer or something, or this is a city bus. You know, these are solid things that we can't see through. If we could see through them, right, then you have this other angle coming down. All right. But these objects are solid, so we can't see through these. So you'll only be doing the 3 visible corners, right? All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, if you have questions, comments, concerns, maybe you just feel free to chime in the chat room, and I will answer those while we're all here. Of course, some general things, make sure that obviously every day you are checking into the Canvas page. You're checking under your assignments tab to see if you have any assignments. Those same assignments should be showing up on your to-do list. They should be showing up on the assignments tab, and you can also reach those through the modules tab. So there shouldn't be, hopefully, any confusion about what it is that you're supposed to do each day. All right. I mentioned earlier, but it bears repeating, that these units that we've been doing, where we did a short elements of art quiz at the very beginning of the semester. We did a week-long unit of line drawing, and then we did a week-long unit last week of shading and value drawing. So each one of those units will be a major grade. The little quiz at the beginning will be a minor grade, and then all the units will be major grades. The grading, of course, in Canvas is kind of like raw data, raw numbers, right? I'm getting in the scores for all your grades, but they're not going together to create your final grade or anything. So the grade where you want to look for your real grade, your actual grade, of course, is always in Power School. That's where the grade for your interim reports will come from. That's where the grade for your report card will come from. And that is the grade that you want to stay on top of and make sure that you are aware of. The grade in Canvas, again, is sort of a raw grade before we have done any calculating, so to speak. So just really look in Power School for your grades. Alrighty. No questions. Going once, going twice. Alrighty. When we're done with this, you guys go check out the assignment in Canvas. have fun with the drawing. It should not be anything you can't handle. It should be really, really straightforward, pretty easy, I hope. If you have questions, feel free to shoot me an email. We can even have a little, one-on-one Zoom if you want to. If you want to show me something, if you want me to show you something, whatever the case may be, but email I think will work fine for most of you. All righty. Still quiet in the chat room, so I'm going to assume everybody's good. All right, you guys immediately go check out Canvas. Go take care of your drawing exercise. Have fun with it. I'm super excited to see what you guys turn in. It's always a blast for me to get a chance to look at your drawings and see you guys actually apply this stuff. It feels like I'm talking to my computer, like I'm talking to myself here in my room by myself. So it's nice to know that there are human beings on the other end and you guys are doing something with this material we're presenting. All righty, yeah. Looks like everybody is good to go. So, all right, we will meet again by Zoom on Thursday, day after tomorrow. You guys will take care of the assignment, and I will see you soon. All right. Adios.